talking about systems and just needing to completely rethink, another challenge that has been top of mind for many leaders is the future of work, hybrid workplaces, and Minal, maybe you can speak to what leaders can do to really be creating inclusive and equitable hybrid workspaces.
Yeah, so it's going to vary by industry and by job function, right? So I really liked what Evans put out, a blog post on hybrid workplaces, and they said it's really important to be able to have conversations about which jobs make a lot of sense and can easily work remotely, which ones can easily be hybrid, and which ones really are needed to be like in the building, right? Like my husband's a firefighter and paramedic. You cannot do that remotely or telecommute for that job, right? Like that is, you need to be like on site for it. So you want to first have those conversations. And then, we can give like tips or tricks, like how to include people in video meetings where like, if you're in the office, everybody should be on camera, but you use a room mic, so on and so forth. But not all of this is sorted out. So this is going to be a time of experimentation and iteration and like refining. And what needs to be at the root of those processes are these values of sovereignty and interdependence. Because that's really what we're talking about when we talk about equity. We're talking about how do we respect an individual's sovereignty and autonomy and right to make decisions that serve them, and balance that with the needs of the community, right? And it is not always it's not always a win-win. It's not always an easy equation. If you can rumble with it and rumble with uncertainty and uncomfortable feelings and conflict, like conflict is like a huge part of this, like, and being competent in being able to address conflict, because the minute you have more diversity, you have more different opinions, you have more different life experiences, and not everything is easily resolvable. But if you can rumble with it, you can usually come up with really innovative, creative solutions that serve the community, as well as allow people some autonomy in their jobs and their lives.
Yeah. Thank you, Minal. I'd like to turn to Barrie now, and drawing from your experience in leading global teams, can you tell us a little bit about what practices you use to build and maintain a sense of connection across geographical distance?
Yes. I want to say I think this is a huge challenge for global organizations, because somehow the physical distance is affects your head. You're thinking about the closeness and distance of where people really are. You know, they're really only a phone call or a Zoom call away, but it feels like, wow, they're still so far. And it's a mindset shift to be able to really think about the connection. But at Global Coaches Network, we used to start right away in the interviewing process. So bringing people in with the intention of learning about them, orienting them to Global Coaches Network, so that we knew them personally, we knew them professionally, and they knew us personally and professionally. So that was started in the interview process. And then the next piece was to orient them and connect them with other coaches. So we did orientation sessions for them about our approach to coaching and what was unique about it, how to talk about it, those sorts of things. And then they met other new coaches during those orientation sessions. And then there were gatherings. We had gatherings and we had speakers where we invited the whole community to come. And even when we were up to 300 and some coaches, still, we still had those gatherings on Zoom. And again, the part of the issue is rotating the meetings. So as much as I hate meetings at 8 o'clock at night, you have to do them because it's like 8 or 9 in China, So that consideration, that's a big consideration for people, that you meet during their time zone, because so many, I hate to say this, so many people are so ignorant about how they schedule their meetings with people in other countries. So, and then the other people feel devalued when they're asked to get on a call at 2 o'clock US time, 2 o'clock AM their time, and whatever it was US time. So anyway, that was a consideration. And then of course, when we worked together, one of the things that in the beginning, I thought, well, how much do I want to involve myself in supervising these work projects? Because they're professionals, they're coaches, they've been doing this for 10 years, they know how to do things. They know our orientation now. But I found that they actually wanted the supervision. they wanted somebody in there to talk with. They wanted to learn while they were engaged in the work process. So whether it was with teams or individuals or, groups of some sort. So we did a lot of, with senior coaches, myself and senior coaches actually, supervising, leading groups and supervision kinds of issues. So, and that connected people also. So I feel they felt connected as much as you can. I mean, I felt they knew we tried, and that mattered to them. I think making the effort, it's a lot about the people you work with knowing the effort that you're trying to be fair and equitable about how you connect with them, and that matters to you. They matter to you.
Right. So I heard there's a logistical piece, but also that human element of that starts right from the moment you hired them, right? So, going off the topic of global organizations, and Minal, you already touched on this, increasing diversity in organizations. So I know in equity, you talk a lot about the need to not just acknowledge, but value differences. So what can leaders do to do that?
Yeah, so I loved what Barrie said, that it's about these sort of small steps are about communicating that you value people, and that there has been such a history of dehumanizing certain types of people that we really have to take intentional effort to rehumanize them. And that starts with valuing difference, which is actually can be pretty hard for some people. Most of us have been really socialized to be afraid of difference. And when I say socialized, I don't just mean intellectually, viscerally. The fear that comes up is viscerally in our bodies. And so sometimes our gut and our instinct is reacting to the ways in which we're socialized, not to the reality of the situation. And so we have to do a lot of inner work in order to learn how to respond to difference in an affirming way while still being able to maintain good judgment. This is not saying let's abandon judgment and it's kumbaya and everybody should be welcome in. There is a need for boundaries, but you need to understand how your own mind works to understand, am I reacting to this person because of a very good sense of boundaries or what I need? Or am I reacting based on how I've been socialized to think of people like this, right? Am I afraid of something here that is not something to be afraid of, right? So that's the first step if you really want to create an equitable organization. The second is to be able to see the system. And the system is really complex and been made invisible. But seeing the system allows you to understand how you've been socialized. So, for example, actually just even putting out this book, and Brevity and Wit has had a great year, and people have sort of congratulated me on being an entrepreneur. And we love to tell these sort of entrepreneurial stories that are very Horatio Alger tales of how we struggled and scrapped by and bootstrapped and all of these things, right? That it's not that I haven't worked hard. However, the only reason I was able to start Brevity and Wit to begin with was because I got married and got on my husband's health insurance. I had tried multiple times before that as a single woman, and between health insurance and trying to make enough money, I couldn't do it. My husband's not rich, but he has great health insurance through the county. And just that 3-month buffer was enough for me to turn it from a loss into a profit. The second part of why we're doing well is because I was able to write a book during the pandemic, because I don't have children. I'm child-free, as I like to say, so I didn't have to homeschool anybody. And my husband does all of the housework. I don't do errands. I don't know how to work the laundry machine. I'm not interested in learning how to work the laundry machine. He has forbidden me from touching the laundry machine. And most women don't get that. And there was a Harvard Business Review article that if you're an ambitious woman, you should either marry a super supportive spouse or just not get married, because that's how high the stakes are, right? And so the system is designed for 2-income households. The system is designed, if you want to be an entrepreneur, to have some other source of revenue, whether that is your parents or your spouse. And until you can see that, you won't be able to address the barriers that are standing in the way of opportunity. When you're like, why don't we have more women in leadership? These are the reasons why. It's not because women don't have confidence. It's not because women are not skilled. It's not because they don't know how to negotiate. It's because of systemic reasons. There was recently a study that came out that said that it's not that women don't negotiate, it's that they are accurately perceiving that they are socially perceived as less desirable to work for when they ask for more money. There is a system that is informing how they are perceived when they do the same thing as somebody from a different identity. And so a leader, if they want to create an equitable organization, needs to see that system before they'll be able to come up with interventions and solutions that actually address the root causes. And then the last thing is that leaders need to want to use their power to create more opportunities for others. If you have an attitude of like, I'm going to get mine and that's just my job, you're not going to be able, like, don't even try, because then you're just putting lipstick on a pig, and it's going to actually make a lot of DEI work more traumatic for people who have been marginalized. If you are interested in saying, like, let's figure out ways to share power responsibly and appropriately in this organization, and I want to make sure that a lot more other people behind me have the same opportunities that I've had, then you can do something really great in your organization.
Right. So awareness and desire, some of the first steps. Barrie, anything that you'd like to add to that?
Oh, geez, so much. But the thing that I'm going to pick is that this difference piece that you started out with, Minal.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just think this is so important. I was a family therapist, couples therapist, before I became a global entrepreneur. And so I'm so aware that in families, often people are not allowed to be different. Like if you're a kid, you're not allowed to disagree with your parents, for example. Even as you're growing up, it's considered a challenge to the adults who are, of course, right about everything. So, so we learn in our families about how to deal with differences way before we ever come into organizations. And we learn about how to deal with people who are different from us outside of the family also. So we get a lot of training before we ever get into our professional roles that we don't even know is there, because it's like culture's like the air that we breathe. We don't even know it's there. It's just, we're just taking it all in. So I love, somebody asked a question about how can you see the system? And Heather, anyway, I love that question because I think that seeing the system, it's very hard to see the system. And so often many of the women that I work with, coaching or mentoring, they don't see the system. They see themselves. They think, what's wrong with me? What do I need to do? How can I make everything better? Because that's what women do. They're socialized to do. And so anyway, and so seeing the system often involves looking around and asking, is this an issue for you? There was one woman that I talked with. She thought she was in a very racist company. And she said, is this my imagination? So she started asking people. And then she found out that it was the most racist company anybody that she talked to ever worked with. And she was like, oh, geez, it wasn't just me, right? Yeah. So sometimes but that's a little tricky, asking questions like that. You be careful. So, and then sometimes discussing it with somebody outside who understands systems thinking, for example, can be a real help to you. So this could be like a whole other conference. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that because I thought that was such a very significant and important observation and question.
Thank you for that perspective. Believe it or not, we're almost at a time. So now I'd like to ask, one final question, maybe in like 1 minute or less, but what is the first step? What do you see as the most critical change that organizational leaders must make to face the future effectively? Where do they start? Who would like to take that first?
Wait, say it again, Alicia. I got distracted by somebody's chat message. I apologize. I was like, no, somebody has in the chat. Say it one more time for me.
Yeah, I'm thinking, it can feel overwhelming, right? Like, how do I tackle this? So what is the next first step? What is the most critical change that a leader needs to make to face the future effectively?
Okay, I can say something about this. I think they have to get very, very honest with themselves about what is my reality, and then start asking other people what is theirs. because I think there's, you know, in the American culture in particular, it's always like there's like this culture of positivity. You know, if you're in a room with people, you say anything like, well, I didn't like that, or I felt badly about it. I mean, it's like, whoa, you know, how negative you are. And so you can't be real if you're not going to acknowledge. You can't change anything if you don't even know what's really going on. And this, you know, that, and I'm a very positive person. I'm not saying, you know, not to be positive, upbeat, but if it's not real, then it's not real. And so you have to start with the reality of what is before you can start to make any changes.
Yeah, Barrie. I mean, Barrie, you're such a kindred spirit. Like you like it's just like authenticity, and I would couple with that like courage.
Oh,
like,
yes.
True moral courage. Like you are like, if you are afraid to look at reality, if you are afraid to learn anything new, if you're afraid to engage in conflict, don't even try to do this, because you're going to make it worse, actually. Because what happens is people put out these nice statements, and then they say that they're creating an environment where everybody can bring their whole self and we're inclusive and we're diverse. But then the minute microaggressions happen or conflict raises its head, leadership retreats into like a turtle and doesn't deal with it. And so like, if you had never put out a DEI statement, somebody from a marginalized identity would know that they can be there and they're playing according to certain rules. If you put out a DEI statement and then you do that, you have actually done more harm, right? So it is better to just not do it than to do it poorly or without any courage behind it or authenticity. Like the reason I love being a DEI practitioner, is because it is the most authentic and integrity-driven field I've ever been in my life. And so we are in a point in time where humanity is facing unknown challenges, and we need courage and moral imagination more than anything else, and we need it in droves.
Thank you both. So courage and self-awareness. I want to thank you both for your time and your wonderful ideas today, and for everyone for joining. So I'm going to pass it back to Russ now. Thank you.
Alicia, Minal, Barrie, that was amazing. Thank you for a very enlightening discussion. Before we move on to our next segment, to recharge, we're going to participate in a 5-minute wellness exercise, and we need a pro for this. So we brought in a pro. Beth Nichols-Howarth from our team here at Evans Consulting is the pro, and she's here to lead us through the wellness exercise. Hey, Beth.
Hey, Russ, how you doing?
Good, thanks.
Good. Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Beth Nichols-Howarth. I am a senior consultant at Evans Consulting. I work in communications, but my previous life and sort of my current life is I've been a yoga instructor since 2006. And imagine that, it's becoming pretty handy as everybody's gone to telework and working from home and sitting on couches and in beds and on floors and at kitchen tables. So what we're going to do today is just a quick 5-minute energizing movement break, quote unquote, but it's one that you can do at home at your desk, or when you eventually go back into an office or a more public setting, you can do, which is why I'm actually in a dress instead of my usual yoga athleisure being off camera at home. But I want everybody, if you would, if you're able to just quickly stand up. I'm going to adjust my camera a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. And we're just going to work out the wrists a little bit, right? So I have one of my favorite yoga instructors is 81 years old, and he's amazing. And he starts every single class like this. Just start to flap your wrists up and down. Just get the wrist moving. You might notice maybe you've gotten some carpal tunnel issues. I personally just had surgery for trigger finger because of too much work in front of a computer. So let's get the wrist moving and then start to shake them out this way. Just as fast as you can, just get it moving. Go back to a bit of that flap up and down. And then shake. You'll take one more breath in. And as you exhale, just let your arms relax at your sides. And we're just going to do a couple of shoulder rolls to stretch out that space between the shoulders and the ears, more commonly known as your neck, that tends to get shortened throughout the day. So as you inhale, slowly bring your shoulders up towards your ears, follow the breath all the way up to the top. And as you exhale, slowly roll the shoulders down your back. Good. We're going to inhale, breathing in, taking those shoulders up nice and slow. Exhale out, slowly bring the shoulders down the back. Good. One more time, inhale, shoulders coming up, keep your chin parallel to the earth. And as you exhale, bring the shoulders down. Good. Maybe just one or the other, roll it around a little bit. And then I'm going to encourage you to sit back down if you stood up. And adjust my camera so that everybody can see me sitting. And I'm just going to show a few stretches that you can do while seated at a desk, right? So you're in your chair, you're sitting at your desk, and you start to feel that pinch right between your shoulder blades, or maybe your neck's getting a little bit tight, or maybe your middle back is achy. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take arms behind the back and grab the elbows. Make sure your shoulders don't come up to your ears. Keep your shoulders down, chin parallel to the earth. And really just think about pulling the shoulders back, not squeezing the back, shoulders back. Take a deep breath in. Exhale out. Get a deep breath in. Exhale out. Deep breath in. Exhale out. We're going to do 2 more. Deep breath in. You can close your eyes if you'd like. Exhale out. Good. 1 more full breath in. And exhale out. Good. Just going to release the arms here. And to really target that pinchy spot right between the shoulder blades, we're going to do what's known, if you do yoga, as eagle arms. So 2 ways of doing this. If you have very tight shoulders, and you just can't do a full wrap, you just want to grab one hand to one shoulder, opposite hand to the opposite shoulder. If you've got more open shoulders, you can wrap starting with your left arm under your right arm, trying to meet your hands and keeping the elbows at shoulder height. So even if your hands are just at opposite elbows here, keep the elbows at shoulder height. Everybody's shoulders down. Take a deep breath in. Exhale out. So it's good to hold these for 7 to 10 breaths, usually as you inhale. With every exhale, just a little more relaxation of the shoulders. Inhale. Exhale. And 2 more. Inhale. Exhale. 1 more breath in. Exhale out. Slowly release your arms wherever they are. Just give them a little shake. What we do to one side, you got to do the other because you don't want to walk around lopsided. So take the opposite arm under or opposite hand under for the opposite elbows, or sorry, opposite shoulders. We're going to take 5 steady breaths in and out. Just remember that the more you do this throughout the day, the more you fight any of those aches and pains that I think most of us, if not all of us, have gone through in these last 19, 20 months. I don't even know how long it's been. Time feels like it has no meaning. But these are just short things you can do. Even if you're going in between meetings, turning off Zoom, going back on Zoom in 5 minutes, you can do these stretches and they will just help keep you more mobile throughout the day. Take 1 more breath in. Exhale out. Good. Release your arms, shake them out. We're just going to do 1 more quick. I'm not even going to show you the whole thing, but it's really good for the mid-body. Sitting straight ahead on your chair, you're just going to turn from your belly, take your right arm behind your chair, left arm around to the side of your chair, and you're just going to twist the upper body. So this is really good for the lower back. Keep your chin facing straight out. Try not to turn over the back shoulder. And then when you come back to center, a little shake. Other side as well. Make sure your breaths are the same count and on the in breath as they are on the out breath. Little twist deeper as you exhale and then back to center. Just give a last little shake. I hope those little tips are helpful throughout your day. Really appreciate you guys, quote unquote, moving with me. So happy to be part of this. Thank you so much for attending. Russ, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Thank you, Beth. Some colleagues thought I was trying to take off out of my seat for a little while there, but it was awesome.
I love that.
I hope everyone else is also energized for our next topic, which is very exciting. Let's welcome Iliana Alvarado. She's the Director of Innovation here at Evans Consulting and is here to lead us through our next exercise. Iliana, hey.
Hey there, Russ. Thank you so much. It's crazy to feel super relaxed now and, energized at the same time. So thank you so much for that, Beth. Welcome, everyone. Really excited to be here and share with you a bit more information about Evan's new Healthy Teams tool. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully it's working here for you all. Great. So with all the information that we heard earlier, you may be wondering, what do I do now within my own organization and with my team? And so I'm going to navigate us through a journey to understand some applicable strategies and tools that you can use within your own organization and within your teams to start building a healthy team. So for this journey, you will need Menti. If you were not on earlier at the beginning and didn't get access to that link, we'll provide that to you shortly, and you'll also see that come through on the chat. So with that, let's start our journey. First, I'm going to introduce you to a cast of characters. And so we're going to learn more about the individuals that are experiencing, just what's been happening over the last 18 months within their own organizations and see who it is that we'd like to follow. So I'll start first with Alpha, owner and CEO of a small business enterprise. And what we've learned from Alpha is that attrition rates are up and revenue is down. Alpha doesn't have the budget for an HR team, but needs to get their employees committed and performing to get back on track. The second character in our story is Mew, a team manager at Acme Company, which is a fairly large organization. And Mew has to tell us that 2021 has been tough. I very much care about my team. I care about the work that they're doing, whether they're at home or at work, but I don't have a lot of experience supporting a virtual team, much less a hybrid team. How do I keep everyone motivated? And then finally, we have Omicron, who is a virtual team member working within a 5-person team remotely. And what Omicron has to say is, I care about my performance and my team, but I'm burnt out. The stress of having my kids at home has been overwhelming, not to mention my constant headaches from too many online meetings. So here we have Alpha, Mu, and Omicron. And what we're going to do is decide which character we'd like to follow through the Healthy Teams journey. And so if you can go to menti.com and enter the code that you see at the top, I'm going to give you a minute or so to decide which character we'd like to follow. So we have Alpha and Mu almost neck to neck. Omicron potentially coming through. Mu is taking the lead here. All right, just a few more seconds. I think we have about 50 people on, so I'll wait until we get to a little bit more. Almost 20% have voted. Or I'm sorry, almost 50% have voted. Okay, I think Mu is the winner. So let's take a look at Mu again. So Mu is a team manager with Acme Company, so fairly large organization, but maybe has a smaller team and really cares about keeping their employees motivated. So let's see what Mu has to do in applying the Healthy Teams tool. So first, Mu is going to have access to an assessment. And what they can expect in this assessment is an evaluation of 5 areas of what we believe to be high-performing teams. And these areas are alignment, collaboration, empowerment, resilience, and trust and well-being. So you heard many of these things come up earlier with our panelists. When Mu decides to take the assessment, it will take approximately 10 minutes to complete and will provide a measurement in these areas to really understand where is the team having challenges as it relates to alignment, mental and emotional health, and an ability to communicate with each other. So Mu is really interested. What can I find out about my team? Mu is going to click on Take Assessment. There's going to be a number of questions that comes up in the assessment. So to give you an example of some of those questions, we have things like team alignment. How is my organization's values, or how does my organization value my team's contributions? We look at collaboration. Are team members forthcoming with information that we need to succeed? And then in trust and well-being, I can lean on my team when I need support. just to give you some representative questions that Mew is seeing as they take this assessment. So Mew completes the assessment and clicks submit and is excited to see what results display. So Mew is going to get these results that show some information about how their team is performing given their feedback in the areas that I mentioned: trust and well-being, resilience, empowerment, collaboration, and alignment. And you'll see that there is a bar chart here that shows how are they performing based on this heat map. So at this point, we are going to decide, what do we do next? Now that we have some more information about how our team is performing, where do we want to go on our journey? So with Mew, we can take a look at the learning library within the Healthy Teams tool and evaluate some of these engaging activities, other tools, theories, and resources. We can call an expert for help. Maybe it's so overwhelming and I just don't know where to begin, so I need to speak with somebody. Or, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed and I just want to take a nap. So we're going to decide as a team, what are we going to do next? Would you like to see engaging activities? Do you want to call an expert for help? Or are you feeling tired and we need to take a break? Okay, people are feeling as energized as I am. Let's see it. Show me the money. What are the engaging activities that we have? We have about 15 people in, so I'll give you a chance to vote if you haven't done so yet. Okay. A couple people want to call an expert for help. We are always here to support and help you along your journey. It looks like Mew is interested in exploring the learning library, so let's go ahead and do that. So show me these activities. Well, here we are. Welcome to the Healthy Teams Learning Library. What you will access here are modules in the areas that we know build a healthy team. So in this case, Mew has decided that maybe resilience was one that they're very interested in. And within this learning library, Mew can access any of these modules at any time in any order. There is no descriptive process for how Mew will follow along in this path. And so for now, we're going to go ahead and click on resilience and see what information comes up. Within the learning library, there are a number of resources. There is more information about what resilience is about. There's more information on theories and resources that you can access if it's a topic that's not familiar to you, in this case to Mew. And then there are strategies and activities that you can work on to build these attributes within your team. So as an example here, we have activities for one-on-one interactions with individual team members. So again, Mew is a manager of teams, maybe one or maybe many. And so we want to give Mew an opportunity to apply these strategies in multiple settings. In this example, there's a good versus grit activity for an individual team member. Then there's an activity for the next team meeting. So if you'd like to apply something with all of your team members, you can do this in a team setting. This example is turning pressure into performance. And when Mew clicks into each of these links, they will get access to a PDF of all of the resources and guidance to facilitate this conversation or these activities. So it's a step-by-step instruction on what to do with the corresponding resources. And then finally, there is a workshop. So if you'd like to do a deeper dive with your team, in this example, it's a force field analysis, then Mew, as the manager, can set aside time, and we have recommendations from 15 minutes to 20 minutes to a half-day event where they can run through and go through again the step-by-steps to facilitate this particular conversation with their team. Again, much more information available in the learning library within each of these modules that will track the assessment as they're completed. The assessment can be taken more than once, so you can see historically over time how your team is performing. So congratulations to MEW. They are well on their way to building a healthy team within their organization. And I'm very pleased and excited to announce that our Healthy Teams tool is coming very, very soon. And I look forward to hearing from you all, hearing your feedback, and hope you enjoy the process and your own journey. With that, I will pass it back over to Russ. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Iliana. We look forward to the launch. Okay, we are now joined by an esteemed group of high-performing leaders. For our next panel discussion with us today, please welcome Nadine Alameh, Chief Executive Officer of the Open Geospatial Consortium. It's great to have you with us, Nadine. And Tom Jones, author, scientist, pilot, and yes, veteran NASA astronaut. Tom, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
And our moderator today is the Director of People here at Evans Consulting, Nicole Anderson. Nicole, it's all yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Russ. So for our next session of today's summit, we are going to transition from best practices and tools to application. We're going to talk with two very impressive leaders with diverse experiences and hear them tell their stories from a boots on the ground perspective. So thank you, Nadine and Tom, for your willingness to be open and transparent today. And we've been talking a lot about healthy organizations, right? It's why we're here. So to kick us off, I'd love to hear from both of you on your perspectives of a healthy organization. Let's dive in first, Nadine, with you. You've had significant experience navigating the many changes over the years in a global environment, and most recently at OGC. So I'm curious, what signs do you look for that are signatures of a healthy team? And what are some of those critical elements? How do you know it when you see it?
So thank you, Nicole, for actually inviting me to be here. I'm humbled to be with Tom, so I'm going to be taking notes. I told everybody I'm very excited. I was taking notes actually throughout. Indeed, I think it's been an interesting couple of years for me, personally, and for everybody on this planet. But being a new CEO for a 27-year-old organization that is a not-for-profit global consortium in a technical field that's booming, it's like adding, one layer of complexity on top of the other. So when you ask about the signature of a healthy team, I think to me, the first thing that pops to my mind is passion. And for a not-for-profit, I think it's almost easy because you usually don't work for a not-for-profit unless you're passionate, right, about the mission of that organization. But that should apply to every organization, right? And so in our case, what makes it more interesting is that the mission itself, we flipped it on its head in the last couple of years. So instead of starting with what we do, that were technical standards, location, it has quickly become about the community, about a community of experts. And again, I think going back to that signature is feeling this feeling of belonging to something that's way bigger than you. And in this case, it's a global community of experts that can actually contribute to disaster response, to pandemic predictions, to climate change. So passion, belonging, I think honestly is what got us through the last couple of years. And maybe those are the two, one of the signatures at least. Helps?
Love it. Thank you so much, Nadine. Tom, I would like to shift that question to you. You've spent your career as an astronaut at NASA, a pilot, as a research scientist, and now a speaker and an author. I imagine you've experienced some very complex challenges with teams in your experience. So what are some of the red flags that you've seen that's kind of tipped you off that a team is unhealthy, or what does a healthy organization look like in your experience? And you're on mute, Tom. If you don't mind just unmuting, we'd love to hear it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for welcoming me to the conversation and the panel discussion today. Yeah, I had 11 years with NASA, and I saw a lot of the amazing things that NASA does. The team and mission control is phenomenal. They helped us up in orbit, and then we had many teams on the space shuttle itself and at the space station. carrying out the scientific work or the engineering work that we had to do up there. Great success with NASA, as you know, for the last 60 years of the space age. But big picture, NASA is a big organization. It's old now, and it's had 2, 3 fatal accidents over the course of its history. And those were largely due to organizational dysfunction. And they've been corrected after each one. But remember, when we lost my friends on the Columbia in 2003, that's 18 years ago. And the challenge for an organization is to remember those lessons learned, remember the fixes to the problems that we confronted, and then let's go forward with a healthy organization to meet the challenges of the future. And right now, that's getting people back to the moon or going on to Mars. I remember one particular incident when I was at the astronaut office, a member of a group of about 130 people with superb talent. They came from diverse backgrounds, but tremendous experience and leadership skills. And yet there were problems in the office. In a particular case, there was a chronic problem with the leadership of the astronaut corps, where they had all these great people working for them all over the planet and in space, and yet they couldn't bring themselves to have an honest conversation with some of the people in their organization. So let's say somebody made a mistake, whether it was in flying or whether it was in a earthbound task or being a member of a team, being a successful member of a team, they failed at that. And when an astronaut failed, the organization was reluctant to go and tell them face to face that they had problems, that there were some fixes that they recommended, and let's see how you do in getting yourself back on track. Instead, they would just let people twist in the wind with no knowledge or insight whatsoever. And so to make a long story short, this created bad morale in the office. We, who had not been part of the dynamic of failure or corrective action, we didn't know what we could do to make ourselves better because we couldn't learn from other people's mistakes because the facts of each individual personnel case, to a degree, were not shared with anybody else. So that was very discouraging. And I saw some very talented people left to wither on the vine, if you will, when they could have been given a nice endorsement, sent out the door to seek a new opportunity. And I think an organization owes its people honest, correct feedback frequently so that you can correct people's courses. If they're off track, you can get them back on course and make use of their talents.
I love that honest and direct feedback. We hear Brene Brown talk a lot about clear is kind. And I've heard Minal talk about it as well in some of our conversations over the years. And so that's really resonating for me, that clear and honest feedback. It's definitely kind to do that. Thank you for sharing that story. Sure. So Nadine, I'm curious, when you talked a little bit about reinventing the organization, do you mind sharing a little bit more? When you realized you didn't have maybe a healthy organization, you had to start over. Maybe tell a little bit about your experiences reinventing an organization.
How much time do you have? No, so the quick version, I think, first of all, it starts with the reinventing piece, right? So for the sake of, everybody, watching, thank you for actually watching. The organization, so our mission is around, and our expertise is around location, right? So that's the geospatial and geospatial consortium. So it's around location. So think mapping, think satellite imagery, which years ago used to be a small niche. You have NASA, so I'm again honored to be with Tom. NASA was providing the data. You have the European Space Agency, so there were just a few, right? It was so small, it was really a niche. And now, think about it. We have self-driving cars, that's all location. We were talking contact tracing, that's all location. Space, actually, now we have a booming commercial space industry, right? I mean, think about it so much. Internet of Things, anything, your phones, any wearables, eventually they're tracking your location. So all of a sudden, we call it the genie is out of the bottle. And so we have to reinvent. So it's not a luxury, it's a necessity, right? To keep up with the times. So back to the healthy organization, I think it was very important to sort of understand, or actually maybe I'm thinking embrace that the reinventing is a journey and that journey takes a team. And I call it, strong, healthy team. And I've been saying, for the last couple of years, we're sort of renovating, I'm calling it, not really reinventing, but you have to do it from the inside out. So we go back to the people, right? And getting them on the same bus with the vision and the mission, and getting the right people in the right seats and the right values. And that's an exercise that's part of the journey. And I think my answer to you here is it took us a long time to establish trust. I think you mentioned it earlier. And also this acknowledgement that change is hard, especially for people who have been, with the organization for a long time. So what do you do and what can I share is it's important to be open and honest and transparent, and to explain and repeat in many ways why you're reinventing, right? We're reinventing to keep up with the world, to scale, and not for the sake of making more money, right? It's for the sake of having a bigger impact, to accelerate the impact. And I go back when the impact is pandemics and disasters and climate change, that's, I think, brings you back to the power of reinventing with the power of a strong and healthy team.
I love it. Thank you so much. And now you've talked about teams and how important those healthy teams are to build a healthy organization. So let's talk about that for just a minute. Maybe Tom, can you share an example? Maybe when you were leading spacewalks at NASA, or from your experience leading teams, what worked well? What was a challenge that you experienced? It's really important for us leaders to learn from each other. So, what comes to mind when you think about teamwork?
Well, we had a challenge when I was on my flight to the space station. So I was one of the two spacewalkers on a crew of 5, and we had to do a lot of construction work at the space station, and it was going to be very intense, 3 spacewalks outside. And I was training for this for about 2.5 years, and I spent 230 hours underwater in my spacesuit training in that environment where you're neutrally buoyant, and you can make your spacesuit behave in that pool as if it would most of the time in space. So it's a pretty good training environment. And now we had a hand grenade thrown into the situation, because about a year and a half prior to flight, we had a personnel problem on our group of 5 on our crew, and one of our crew members was removed from the space shuttle crew. And he was the lead spacewalker. Lucky break for me, right? So now I become the lead spacewalker by default, and I had to step up into that leadership role. I hadn't been planning to, but now it's time for me to show what I can do there. And so we had a replacement crew member brought onto the team. And we had, like I say, about a year on the schedule at that point till launch. It actually stretched out to about 1.5 years. And I had to find a way to bring my friend into the fold, if you will, and make him a productive member of the team right away. Now, he was training for spacewalks as well offline, but when he came in, he didn't know our particular job. One of the things that he was able to do was jump right on the plans for our 19 hours of spacewalking. And we had a first spacewalk to install this big science laboratory called Destiny. And it involved a lot of intensive handwork outside and a critical series of events to connect electrical power and computer cabling and cooling lines to the space station. And the way that Mission Control had planned this was to do it in a relaxed way, to just hook up some temporary heaters to the laboratory and keep it thermally conditioned until we could go back out the next time and hook up all the critical connections. My friend said, let's plan for success. Let's think of what we could do if we do everything right. And he says we could get the critical cooling lines connected, we could get our electrical power supplied, and that way we could begin the installation and activation of the laboratory on the first day rather than waiting 2 days later, 48 hours in delay. And that suggestion he brought forward to our crew, and I was able to get it up to, with his help, to Mission Control. And we had a big confab of all the controllers on the ground who were going to be supporting us. Got our friend's suggestion reviewed by all the tech experts, and they said, yeah, we could save 48 if we succeed in anything. And we had convinced them in the swimming pool that we could get through this intense timeline. So we brought my friend Beamer along with his suggestion, and that made him an integral member of the team right away. His creativity had brought him into the team, and he was instantly respected because of his suggestion. And we pushed and promoted that integration as much as we could with mission control. So right away, he has his confidence. He's a member of the team. He's producing for us, and we sailed on from there. So he was the best friend I needed on that mission, and friends for life. He really did do something at first spacewalk that he quickly overcame an ammonia leak that saved a $1.4 billion laboratory. So salutes to Beamer, my partner.
I love it. And I'd venture to guess we probably don't have a lot of other astronauts, right? But what I love about on the call here today, but what I love about your story is the application to really any role that we have as leaders, and how some of these lessons learned that you're sharing here can apply to any of us. I love that.
Absolutely. You need to look at people for their innate talent and then promote that and make them a contributing member as quickly as you can. And that really worked for us. And I think that's the trait of a good leader, is to delegate and not be you don't have to be the font of all the wisdom. You can tap your team to bring that forward.
Yeah, I love it. All right. So when we talk about teams, let's talk a little bit about the generational differences in the workplace. Nadine, how do you handle the differences or how did the differences across the generations impact teams from your experience? How do you account for the various perspectives and needs and motivations of the various generations from Gen Z all the way to baby boomer?
That's an amazing question, because it hits at diversity, which is overall amazing for a team. And I really appreciate the first half of the webinar, hitting on women issues, especially, through COVID. So really appreciative, because it definitely resonated. So the generational difference, so I'm glad we covered the diversity, the gender diversity. So the generational diversity, I think now I understand when people used to say, having kids makes you younger, right? Because you learn so much from them. And I have learned so much from my, 2 boys over the pandemic, because I was able to observe them literally every day. But the way they learn is different. I mean, these kids don't use books. They have their Chromebooks, right? So everything is electronic. They collaborate on Google Docs. And then you have the whole gaming environments where they strategize with their friends on not necessarily gaming, but all sorts of interactions, right? And it actually tells you that they learn differently, they interact differently, and they almost think differently. So we have to evolve with them. And I think the same applies, at work. The basic assumptions, right, on technologies and the business models, right, and the customer interactions are different with the new generation. And that challenges us big time. For instance, at OGC, one of the changes that we have been pushing is we have to modernize our foundation standards, right? Because times have changed, the programming languages have changed, the use cases have changed, and we were just saying, now the genie is out of the bottle. Everybody needs to use those standards. And we looked towards the younger generation. Like, how would you do that? You cannot do that. You cannot prepare for the next 25 years if you don't bring the younger generation with you today. And that means it has changed a lot of what we do. We used to do things top down. And I think right now it's more like, for instance, for us, the developers are the ones that are driving, the pace and the outcomes eventually. The standards themselves, the technical documents are actually lighter, easier to understand, easier to share. And the way we run projects is way more agile. Again, I think it's influenced by this new generation. So I can go on, but one of the challenges is, it is always a mixed environment, because that's how we benefit from each other. And what I've seen is we have always to remind ourselves to be respectful both ways, right? So the younger generation to be respectful of, I don't want to say us older people, but the the older generation, because there's legacy that needs to be respected, and there's operational legacy that needs to be even more respected. You cannot break things. I know Evans works a lot in aviation. You cannot just, introduce things that make, planes start falling from the sky because you're testing something, right? And the other way is, I know they're youngsters, but we also need to respect that this is the way of the future. So I would say respect both ways when it comes to diversity, and essentially ensuring a healthy, back to the healthy team, right? The healthy organization.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I marvel at some of the tensions that might come up as the different generations work together. Can you talk a little bit about how you navigate those tensions and really celebrate the tensions in order to create those that open, diverse thought and ideas?
I think the easiest thing is to listen. We need to listen to each other, and I don't think we do that enough. But actually listening to what they have to offer, and for them to also listen as to why things have been done this way, right? And also to appreciate this goes back to the respect and appreciation, then to appreciate that we cannot change over time, right? I know you have your own way of doing things. I know we've done things a certain way. Especially I go back to the operational world. The new generation is all innovation, quick, new business models, let's try this, let's start this startup. But at the end of the day, you have to make it run in the real world for a long, long time. And I think just working together, understanding why we're doing this, and it goes back to the common purpose, the common vision, right? And it's not easy. So you have to live with it and try again.
Yeah, I love it. Listen, it's such a simple thing, and it's so easy to forget, right? So thank you for bringing that forward. Now, we talked a little bit about trust earlier and used some examples. Nadine and Tom, you mentioned about empowering your team and delegating, and so I'm just curious. I'm going to ask this question for both of you. Tom, maybe you can start. Just share a little bit more about how do you build that trust, that psychological safety, and really empower your employees.
Oh, well, I have my own experience to talk to that point. I was a member of the shuttle crew on Columbia back in 1996. In fact, it was 25 years ago this month. Just in a few days, we'll have our launch anniversary. Crew of 5 people, and I was going to be a spacewalker. I was going to get to do my first spacewalk out of Columbia's airlock, and we were going to test some techniques for helping build and maintain the space station. So my partner was Tammy Jernigan. She was the lead spacewalker, and so we trained for a year together, and we were ready to go. So we get up to space, and how shall I put this? It was Thanksgiving night, and we were going to go on our first spacewalk. Both of us going outside for the first time, and we were in the airlock where you an outer door to go out into the cargo bay and do your work. And Tammy got the go from mission control to turn the doorknob, or swing the handle, in fact, the mechanical handle, to open the hatch, and it wouldn't move. It was jammed shut. And so basically, this is like being locked into your room, and you've got an important job to do on the other side, and you can't get out of the room. And it was incredibly frustrating. I tried to move the handle. She tried it over again. We inspected it. We did all the troubleshooting. We mission control, but after 2 hours, they said, cancel this walk. Just come back inside and we'll troubleshoot it overnight. So needless to say, we were both very disappointed. And a couple of days later, after a long process of troubleshooting and trying to figure out what the problem was, they figured out that the doorknob was jammed internally. Mechanically, there was some kind of debris that was causing it to jam, and we couldn't access that in the vacuum of space. So we had to cancel both spacewalks. So it's a dagger to the heart. It's just a terrible, crushing disappointment to train for a year for what is regarded by most astronauts as the top line job, to get to do a spacewalk. And we were being denied that by some simple mechanical failure. So we were both just crushed professionally and mentally at that point. So here's where the trust comes in. My commander, Ken, recognized how disappointed we were. And we had another week to go in the mission. So he had to keep our spirits up and make us productive again somehow. So one of the things he did for me was he recognized that he had to get me back in the game somehow. So we had some rocket firings to do on Columbia to change and adjust our orbit and rendezvous with the satellite. And so he let me, the mission specialist on board, not the pilot, not the commander, he had me sit in the seat and fire the rockets on Columbia, run down the checklist with him. And then I got to fly the space shuttle, which is not typically my job. So I'm at the controls of Columbia and I get to fire the rockets and change our orbit. And all of that was just, wow, I get to be a rocket scientist, if you will, in real life. And so, I think he did deliberately to get me engaged and to give me a treat I ordinarily wouldn't have had. And it was a recognition. He saw my condition and wanted to bring me up. And that happened was both of us were, again, several days to recover from, and we had a CNN, and I introduced one of my graphs with something like, well, I hope my boss down there is listening and he'll give us another chance to do a spacewalk. And it was at the time, but we landed, we got out of Columbia on the runway in Florida, and there was my boss, the chief of the astronaut corps. And within a few minutes, he was right up next to both Tammy and me saying, hey, look, I know how badly this disappointment must have struck you. And I recognize that, and it's not fair. And he says, I'm going to do everything I can to get you guys another opportunity to do a spacewalk. And I'm working on it right now. I have a plan to get you up in space, maybe in about 9 months on a scheduled mission that has a need for a spacewalk. So I'm going to see if I can make that happen. And then he went away. But to Tammy and me, this was a tremendous lift to know that our boss had figured out what our mindset was in space, recognized the disappointment professionally. We weren't guaranteed another shot at this. He had no obligation to do that, yet he came up and said, I'm going to work very hard to get both of you back into space. Now, he didn't make it work in 9 months. I think it was about 3 years later when I finally got to do my spacewalks, but he was able to make that promise a reality. And both Tammy got up before I did. I got up on a separate mission that I just told you about with the Destiny Science Lab. And so tremendous boost for us. And I think that was because both of our supervisors, my commander and my astronaut chief, recognized what he could do to help his people. And they recognized that it wasn't obligated, it wasn't obligatory, but they thought that was within their power, and they realized they could get us back in the game that way. So I thought that was one of the best examples of leadership I'd ever seen, both in space and on the ground.
I love it. Thank you. I mean, that's intentionality, it's noticing, and it doesn't take much, right? And that's the example that you gave. Really, it just highlights that it really doesn't take much for a leader to notice and take that extra step to make such a big difference. Thank you.
Yeah, and the chief who did that for us was Bob Cabana. He's like the deputy administrator at NASA right now. So he's gone on to a long and productive career because he's got that kind of people skill.
Yeah, I love it. So I could sit here and talk to you both all day. We have time for only one more question though. So Nadine, I'm going to ask to follow up with you on that trust question on LinkedIn so we can continue that conversation. But just as we wrap, we close out our time together, I would like to hear your thoughts on what advice you would give other leaders for how to lead in uncertain times when you know you don't have all the answers.
First of all, I'm still digesting what Tom was presenting. I mean, it's amazing.
That unintelligible, eh?
I love it though. I could listen for hours. So the advice, which honestly also relates to the trust part, passion, I already said it before, right? You have to have passion or nobody will follow you, or nobody will believe you, and nobody will trust you. The vision, that's almost the easy part. I think being genuine and being transparent, which means don't pretend to know you know everything because people can tell. And then this is how you lose the trust. So I think my advice is just, follow your passion and others will come along. Be genuine so others can trust you, and be transparent so that you're open to help and support. And that's how you build a team. don't pretend that you know it all. It's okay to be to show signs of weakness, because this is, you know, in times of uncertainty, in times of crisis, you know, we need to help each other. We need to empower each other. I think this is what Tom's, you know, story was about, the empowerment and then the collaboration. I hope that hits, you know, at least some nerves with whoever is listening.
That's wonderful. And Tom, I want to ask you that same question. So just as we close out, what advice would you give other leaders for how to lead in times of uncertainty when you don't have all the answers as a leader?
Well, we have to go back to our previous discussion of the generational gap. You know, you've got all this young talent at a place like NASA, for example, and in the commercial space sector, places like Blue Origin and space, they're populated with young engineers who are working flat out to meet their goals. And so, you know, NASA's from that entrepreneurial spirit in the commercial sector, but they have a lot of people as well in the NASA organization. They maybe have not experienced the losing the space shuttle Columbia back in 2003. They may have seen the movie Apollo 13, but they haven't lived it as part of the organization. So, you know, NASA's challenge to lead is to inspire those people with a goal like return Americans to the moon and moving on to Mars eventually after that, but to do it with acceptance and recognition and acceptance of risk, but also with an aim towards, you know, success. And NASA has a very high bar for success. So I think one way you convey that as a leader is to let these people have their head, give them their free reign to introduce innovative solutions. That's certainly what's happening in the commercial space sector. And at NASA, I think that's a challenge for leaders to get their people to contribute even wild ideas and see which ones make the best sense. It's just because it's been done that way for a generation doesn't mean it has to be done that way in achieving this goal of returning to the moon. So, you know, you've got to tell them it's a dangerous, risky business and failure has real consequences, like you lose people's lives. But you also have to tell them that, you know, we didn't succeed in the 1960s in going to the moon by being a very cautious, risk-averse organization. So let's encourage people to bring forward their best ideas. Prove to me as a leader that you've got the risks and benefits weighed properly, and then we'll discuss whether it's the right way to go forward. But you need to have that talent bring forth their best ideas, and you can't suppress that just because it wasn't done that way for the last generation. So leaders have to be brave enough to accept the risk of letting their people contribute.
Fantastic. Thank you again, Nadine and Tom, for being here to share your stories. I hope that our participants joining today are able to take away some helpful insights. And at this point, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Bob and Jack, our managing partners of Evans Consulting, and as we now wrap up our time together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nadine and Tom. So as we close out, thanks to all of you for being a part of this with us. Thank you as well to Minal and Barrie in particular, as well as Nadine and Tom. Really appreciate your time, your insights, sharing your talents with us and our guests today as they joined us. So a couple of quick closing items. We're going to send a quick survey to all of you to get some feedback on the session, what worked well, what we can improve next time. Really look forward to seeing your inputs. We'll be continuing the conversation both on LinkedIn and through our Evans Thrive newsletter. If that's not something you receive, check us out on our website, evansconsulting.com. We'd be happy to get you included. And thank you again. We look forward to doing more of these, hopefully with you and those in your network. Have a wonderful rest of your week and a great upcoming holiday season. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.